Hello, and welcome to Unit 3, Presentation Number 1. What I want to talk about are, of course, states of consciousness. In this brief overview, we will define consciousness as a function of what you believe. Some religions use metaphors such as light or dark to describe consciousness. The medical community constructs operational definitions of consciousness to explain clinical levels of consciousness. Psychology describes consciousness as an awareness of everything that is going on around you and everything inside of your head that you use to organize and maintain your behavior. We will begin with a clinical definition of the levels of consciousness and move on to the more psychological states. Clinical definitions. It is important to firmly understand that clinical is not always psychological. Even though there are clinical psychologists, those psychologists are not medical doctors. Psychiatrists are medical doctors. The normal state of consciousness comprises either the state of wakefulness, awareness, or alertness in which most human beings function while not being asleep, or one of the recognized stages of normal sleep from which the person can be readily awakened. Clouding of consciousness is a very mild form of altered mental status in which the patient has inattention and reduced wakefulness. A confusional state is more profound in that it includes disorientation, bewilderment, and difficulty following commands. Lethargy consists of severe drowsiness in which the patient can be aroused by moderate stimuli and then drift back to sleep. Obtundation is a state similar to lethargy in which the patient has a lessened interest in the environment, slowed responses to stimulation, and tend to sleep more than normal, with drowsiness in between sleep states. Stupor means that only vigorous and repeated stimuli will arouse the individual, and when left undisturbed, the patient will immediately lapse back to the unresponsive state. Finally, coma is a state of unarousable unresponsiveness. In other words, they are completely unresponsive. These are the clinical definitions of consciousness. Psychology outside of neuroscience does not have such a precise clinical definition of consciousness. At the About Education's website, consciousness refers to our individual awareness of our unique thoughts, memories, feelings, sensations, and environment. Aspects of consciousness studied by psychologists include sleep, dreams, hypnosis, meditation, and psychoactive drugs. The conscious experience was one of the first topics studied by early psychologists. Structuralists, if you'll remember from Unit 1, used a process known as introspection to analyze and report conscious sensations, thoughts, memories, and experiences. Also, unique feelings. American psychologist William James compared consciousness to a stream of unbroken and continuous thought despite constant shifts and changes. While the focus of much of the research in psychology shifted to purely observable behaviors during the first half of the 20th century, research on human consciousness has grown tremendously since the 1950s. You will notice that I have created a mind map. This should be available in the Unit 3 class Files section. Sleep is part of biological circadian rhythm. Biological cycles occur about every 24 hours. Sleep follows a circadian rhythm. Hormone secretion, blood pressure, body temperature, and urine production also have circadian rhythms. Although everyone sleeps, no one really knows why people sleep. Researchers have proposed several theories to explain how sleep evolved to be a necessary behavior, but they have not agreed. Sleep disorders. Everyone has occasional difficulty sleeping, but some people have insomnia, a chronic problem with falling or staying asleep. Another kind of disorder is narcolepsy, which is a tendency to fall asleep periodically during the day. Narcolepsy can be dangerous as people who experience it may fall asleep while driving or operating machinery. Sleep apnea is another condition that can have negative effects on health and safety. People who have sleep apnea stop breathing many times during a night's sleep, and each time they stop breathing, they wake up briefly and gasp for air. This prevents them from getting enough deep sleep, which leads to irritability and sleepiness during the day. Chronic sleep apnea can also result in high blood pressure. Psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud believed that dreams allow people to express unconscious wishes they find unacceptable in real life. He drew a distinction between the manifest content and the latent content of dreams. The manifest content is the plot of the dream, who's in the dream, what happens, and so on. The latent content is the dream's hidden meaning. According to Freud, the manifest content is a symbolic representation of the latent content. In other words, the plot acts as a disguise that masks the real meaning of the dream. Freud theorized that many psychological problems stem from repressed sexual urges. In his dream theory, certain objects symbolize sex or genitals. The most famous Freudian symbol is the cigar, which, owing its shape and association with men, usually represents a penis. Freudian psychiatrists would interpret tunnels and caves as vaginas. Another theory, called the activation synthesis theory, proposes that neurons in the brain randomly activate during REM sleep. Dreams arise when the cortex of the brain tries to make meaning out of these random neural impulses. According to activation synthesis theory, dreams are basically brain sparks. Some researchers think that dreams express people's most pressing concerns and might help to solve problems in day-to-day life. If someone has an important job interview coming up, for example, he may rehearse scenarios for the interview in his dreams. If someone has relationship difficulties with a significant other, his dreams may give clues to help solve the problem. Some theories argue that dreams arise during the brain's routine housekeeping functions, such as eliminating or strengthening neural connections. Dreams, then, are a way of cleaning up the brain files. Hypnosis is a procedure that opens people to the power of suggestion. A hypnotist puts a subject in an altered state by encouraging relaxation and sleepiness, and often describing the sorts of physical sensations a subject should be feeling. Once a subject is in the altered state, he or she may act, perceive, think, or feel according to the hypnotist's suggestions. Not everyone can be hypnotized, and some people are more hypnotizable than others. Ernest Hilgard proposed that hypnosis causes people to dissociate and divide their consciousness into two parts. One part responds to the outside world, and the other part observes but doesn't participate. According to this theory, hypnosis can make people not react to pain because hypnosis separates the part of consciousness that registers pain from the part of consciousness that communicates with the outside world. Many other researchers, such as Theodore Barber and Nicholas Spanos, think hypnosis happens when a suggestible person plays the role of a hypnotized person. According to this theory, hypnotized people simply behave as they think they are expected to. Meditation is the practice of focusing attention. People meditate to enhance awareness and gain more control of physical and mental processes. Techniques used in meditation vary and include activities such as repetitive chanting and breathing exercises. Meditative states are associated with an increase in alpha and theta brainwaves, and physical indicators of relaxation such as slowed pulse and breathing. Some researchers have found that meditation has long-term effects, such as improving physical and mental health and reducing stress. However, researchers disagree about whether meditative states are unique states of consciousness. Some researchers believe relaxation techniques can produce the same kind of state produced by meditation. Psychoactive medications. Psychoactive drugs, as opposed to medicinal drugs, have psychological effects. This means that they change sensory experience, perception, mood, behavior, and thinking. Psychoactive drugs are sometimes called recreational drugs, though some have legitimate and medical uses. Types of recreational drugs. Researchers usually classify recreational drugs into four types: stimulants, sedatives, narcotics, and hallucinogens. Stimulants are drugs that can stimulate the central nervous system. In other words, it increases your awareness, makes you more excitable. Some of these drugs are nicotine, caffeine, cocaine, amphetamines, and crystal meth. Moving on to sedatives, these are drugs that slow down the central nervous system and can very well put you in another altered state, such as sleep or unconsciousness. Some of these are alcohol, Valium, Xanax, and barbiturates. An example would be Seconal. Narcotics are also called opiates, and these are drugs that are generally used to relieve pain. Morphine, heroin, opium, codeine, and hydrocodone. This is also known as Vicodin. Moving on to hallucinogens, these are drugs that cause sensory and perceptual distortions. Examples of these are salvia, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, and PCP. PCP is generally used for horses and not humans. On to what a lot of researchers would call the fifth drug type. We move on to cannabis. Drugs derived from the cannabis plant, such as marijuana or hashish, have features of more than one of these drug types. So researchers sometimes consider cannabis to be a separate fifth drug type. These are just some of the effects. You can cause an uplift in mood, an increased desire for snack food, and can cause coughing, asthma, and other respiratory ailments. One use for marijuana could be for cancer patients who have trouble eating. When people regularly use a drug, they may develop a tolerance to it. As time goes on, people with a tolerance need more and more of the drug to get the same effect. When people stop using a drug after a long period of regular use, they often experience withdrawal symptoms. Different drugs produce different types of withdrawal symptoms, and not all drugs are physically addictive. With chronic use, people can get physically or psychologically dependent upon a drug. Physical dependence happens when a person must take the drug to avoid withdrawal symptoms. Psychological dependence is when a person keeps taking the drug because of cravings. A drug can be both physically and psychologically addictive. Drug use can be dangerous for several reasons. Heavy or frequent use of drugs can damage body tissues and organs such as the heart and the liver. You can also get overdoses of some drugs, including sedatives, stimulants, and narcotics. These kinds of overdoses can be lethal. Drugs can have also dangerous indirect effects by causing people to behave in risky, accident-prone, or unhealthy ways. If you would like a copy of these references, please send me an email. This is for Unit 3, Discussion 1. Thank you for watching this video.